Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the book of Job and our daily Bible study. We are in chapter 16, taking a look at Job's response to his friend Eliphaz. If you would like to download our PDF, you can download it for free at tobelikechrist.com. There's a link in the description. We remain in the second section and the longest section of Job, chapters 3 through 37. Job is, as I mentioned, responding to his friend Eliphaz, who recently once again accused him of sinning, and Job is once again saying that he's not being punished for some kind of sin in his life. This misery has come upon him for some other reason. He doesn't know the reason, but he's going to put his faith in God. But he's very frustrated with his situation, which we'll see in this chapter. So let's go over and take a look at our outline on page number 2. Our first section today is going to be verses 1 through 6, miserable comforters. Job called his friends miserable comforters, and he threw Eliphaz's statement about windy words, or like empty, vain words, back at him. Eliphaz had said that about Job's words in chapter 15, verse 2. Job kind of throws that back at him in the beginning of chapter 16. Job said that he could just as easily sit in their place. The roles could be reversed, and he could be sitting there regurgitating useless proverbs to shame them, kind of like they were doing to him. But there was another option, one that Job's friends had spurned, that they had foregone, and that was to use their words to comfort Job. And Job was angry with his friends because they chose just to skip past the comfort part and to go straight to shaming him. Section number 2, verses 7 through 18, really makes up the bulk of this chapter. Job attributes his suffering to God opposing him. Now, Job was right to reject the counsel of his friends. They were wrong, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Job was right about everything. In this section, Job describes God as his enemy, as if it's God who's the one who's opposing him. Now, we know that from Job 1 and 2, it's not God who's opposing him, and it's actually Satan. So Job does get this wrong. Don't think that Job just, everything that comes out of Job's mouth is perfectly, that he has some kind of perfect knowledge of what's going on in this situation. He doesn't. He describes God as having shriveled him up and torn him. He says in verses 12 through 13, I was at ease, and he, speaking of God, he broke me apart. He seized me by the neck, and he dashed me to pieces. He set me up as his target. His archers surround me. He slashes open my kidneys and does not spare. He pours out my gall on the ground. Job had been mourning and in misery for so long that he describes sewing sackcloth, that rough material that people wore when they were mourning, describes sewing that to his skin. It had been on him for so long. So I think you read that part of the text and you're almost like, is Job giving up on God? Is he going to abandon his faith in God like Satan wanted him to? And the answer is no, and we see that towards the end of the chapter in verses 19 through 22. My witness is in heaven, Job says, and that's our title for section number 3. Though Job was clearly very frustrated with the situation that he was in, and even put some of that blame on God, I think inappropriately, he still believed that God was his best chance to find relief and to escape the misery that he's in. He still wanted to go before God and appeal his case and testify to his innocence. He said, quote, even now, behold, my witness is in heaven, and he who testifies for me is on high, in verse 19. Job's expression of the concept of God as his enemy, followed immediately by his insistence that God was still his savior, I think it can give modern readers a bit of whiplash. And I know for me personally, it kind of gives me a bit of whiplash when I read him going from complaining about God to saying, okay, but God is still my strength, my witness. He's still the one who can vindicate me. Now, expressing this idea was difficult for me, and so I was actually reading some commentaries to try to kind of work this clear into my head, and I came across Albert Barnes' commentaries, and I like a lot of his stuff, and I thought he articulated Job's mindset really well. So this last part I want to read from his commentary, see what he has to say, and how he articulates Job's mindset. He says, quote, this is an evidence of returning confidence in God. When Job is saying that he still trusts in God to vindicate him. This is an evidence of returning confidence in God, to which Job always returns, even after the most passionate and irreverent expressions. Such is his real trust in God, that though he is betrayed at times into expressions of impatience and irreverence, yet he is sure to return to calmer views and to show that he has true confidence in the Most High. I thought that was really well said. And I actually want to learn something from that in our application section today. This application is a little bit different. Having ended this study with a quote from a commentary, I thought that I would mention one of the ways that I get a lot of value out of commentaries, and one way that all Bible students can get value out of commentaries. Of course, you can use a commentary to figure out the meaning of a passage that's really difficult if you don't understand it. But one way that I get a lot of value out of them is in getting help articulating ideas that I mentally understand and can get my head wrapped around, but I can't quite formulate the words to articulate them. You know, lucky for us, in years past, many brilliant men have studied these same texts and all the texts of the Bible, all the pieces of the Bible. And in almost every case, at least one of them has found a brilliant way to share the intent of the author through their own words. And we get to benefit from that. And so hearing the author's intent articulated clearly helps not only our comprehension, but also helps us to share the meaning with other people if we're going to be helping somebody else through that text in teaching. I wanted to share that as an application because I think a lot of people, they think, oh, commentary, that's if you don't understand something, then you go to the commentary. But just hearing other people talk about texts can also be very valuable, even when we have kind of a baseline understanding of them already through our own study. So that is our Job 16 study, and Lord willing, we'll be back tomorrow to discuss Job 17. Until then, have a stupendous day.